Hey everybody, welcome here from the Salt Lake City office, Studio 19 as we call it. I'm here with Todd Miller, VP of Product from Nitel. Excited to be here as you know, doing an engineering review as part of our Race to the Summit series. Todd, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey Josh, my pleasure. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome, excited. So let's get into it. So Todd, I want to get into the weeds here. That's the whole goal of this. And one of the first things I want to talk about here, you've got some great flexibility in your platform with Nitel Connect. Can you go in a little bit, talk to me about what Nitel Connect is, how you're using it, and the value that you see in it?
Absolutely. So to Nitel Connect represents a platform that culminates over 2 years of lessons learned. What the market's looking for in SD-WAN, what our customers are looking for in SD-WAN, how we've deployed it, what are the use cases, technical requirements, features, and so forth that have been most popular and desired and required within our designs. At the same time, it also represents a lot of lesson learned in the areas of limitations and roadblocks, challenges, et cetera. And as such, we took a step back, and with the addition of the Cisco SD-WAN from the Viptela acquisition, with the inclusion of that platform as our third SD-WAN platform, we relaunched a re-envisioned SD-WAN capability labeled Nitel Connect that was created on the tenets of flexibility and predictability.
So, you mentioned predictability. That's one of the things that we've grown up with you guys, always, multi-levels for access into that. So, from a technical perspective, can you break into a little bit for me what that means? How are you guys accomplishing that predictability?
Absolutely. So, one of the predictability requirement of Nitel Connect, that aspect really comes from a lot of the hype around SD-WAN and some of the misunderstandings as it relates to customers and organizations being able to achieve MPLS-like predictability with pure internet SD-WAN. The reality is that's just not accurate. So Nitel Connect was developed around the use of Nitel's nationwide MPLS network as the middle mile for customers. Studies have shown that while the last mile is often pointed to as the area within the traffic flow that represents the most negativity in terms of latency or packet loss, the reality is that your packet spends so little time in the last mile that even though the middle mile statistically has less impact from latency or packet loss, because of the greater amount of time your packet spends there, the impact is therefore much, much greater to that overall traffic conversation. So in order to leverage and bring more predictability, especially in pure internet SD-WAN deployments, we leverage on-net circuits, for instance, DIA, along with a gateway sitting on the edge of our network in one of our 7 POPs nationwide. We bring the customer's traffic to our network, and then we use our network as a backbone in order to bring that traffic to ultimately where the most intelligent egress point is, whether that's another one of our POPs for another customer location, headquarters, data center, et cetera, whether that be to a public cloud deployment via our Cloud Connect product. We'll hand that traffic directly off to the cloud fabric of Amazon or Azure, Salesforce, et cetera. We're also interconnected or peered with all of the market share leading hosted voice providers. So again, we can bring that traffic very expeditiously to one of those hosted voice providers, and again, create predictability around that experience.
So you bring up a good point. So let's talk about that, right? Going from the way things used to be architected to this flexible model, right? As you've opened up things with regard to cloud connectivity and on-ramps to these providers, what have you seen? How have you seen that uptake in that response from a customer perspective, now giving them the ability to set the edge wherever they want and connect to any cloud provider they want? What's that feedback been like from the customers?
Well, the feedback's been overwhelmingly positive, and especially since we have multiple, again, options, flexibility around how you can achieve that cloud connectivity, whether that be a private, secure, low latency connection option, whether that be cloud on-ramp via the Cisco platform, that's more of a path optimization for pure internet. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we're really focusing on the experience, and that experience is driven from the performance of the underlying network. So the most consistency that we can bring to that cloud connection, that connectivity, whether again that be IaaS, infrastructure as a service, or software as a service, we're creating a better experience for the customer and therefore creating a better business environment.
So, one more thought with regard to that predictability. As you get into architecture conversations with these customers, how much is that coming up? It needs to be in consideration that I'm connecting to this hyperscaler or this private, whatever it might be. How often are you seeing that actually come up in the conversation?
Well, it's hard to say. It really depends upon the customer, the organization, and perhaps maybe SMB, SME, enterprise, the space of the organization that you're talking to. Certainly from it's still the same conversation, if you will. The manner in which it's conducted differs. You're talking to an SMB or an SME, you're really talking about experience. I need my application to work. I need it to have the right amount of response time or interaction performance. For instance, maybe it's a transactional application. So those types of customers don't necessarily speak in terms of middle mile, last mile, predictability. Then, of course, you're working with the larger enterprises, and the conversation tends to be a little more technical, a greater amount of onboard technical resources. And then we speak in terms of things like latency and predictability and actual middle mile ingress, egress. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to accomplishing the right experience for the customer.
So one last thought to kind of wrap up on that. I obviously I see that there's huge value in being able to connect to that, help set that cloud edge, and having that, right? With us having you as a supplier that has the capability to do that. Have you seen where that's been would have been a showstopper if you didn't have the ability to connect to clouds? Have you run into customers where having that has been a requirement?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the vast amount of our SD-WAN deals today are including some form of cloud connectivity component. And the reality is that, the studies are clear that the majority of customers are either have moved or in the process of moving to some level of cloud deployment. And frankly, when you're rethinking your wide area network, that cloud connection has to be part of that conversation, because you really need to be assessing the full scope of what that traffic flow is going to look like, where those endpoints are, where those applications and services are sitting, where those organizational users are located, so that you can understand the traffic patterns, traffic flows. And really, the alternatives beyond that are not leveraging the capabilities of something like SD-WAN. If I'm not flowing that cloud connection traffic over the SD-WAN, and I'm losing a good part of the value of that. And so cloud connectivity really needs to be part of that WAN conversation.
Beautiful. So let's talk about the SD-WAN platforms here. You've got some functional differences. You've got some technology that I think applies to certain verticals. Can you talk to me a little bit about where that functionality comes into play and how that's helped differentiate you guys?
Absolutely. So, we have three SD-WAN technologies as part of Nitel Connect, and the idea behind that really is simply the fact that there isn't one size that fits all from a customer organizational requirements and needs, business objectives, not to mention price points. So you look at something like Barracuda, which is really our SMB, SME targeted SD-WAN capability. Firewall first, security integrated, lends itself to a customer who needs an all-in-one self-contained solution. A little bit differences from a data visualization analytics, more of a site-specific versus, say, a WAN-wide or holistic view.
And who would you say on Barracuda, right, to help partners kind of position? And I know we're gonna talk about these three. Where does that Barracuda fit? Where's the ceiling for that? I mean, we obviously know security first. There's obviously a great play there, but what is it? Is there a location cap that you see that hitting, maxing out on? Where do you see that fitting best?
No, it's not really a location cap. Really comes down to as to whether or not security is a requirement for an integrated SD-WAN solution. As it's a firewall first product, and next gen firewall is part of every deployment. You can't be disconnected or decoupled from the product. At the same time, it also has a very, very aggressive price point, which allows us to attack many of the SMB or smaller multi-site retail point of sale type applications that are a large multi-site franchise type of situation where price is one of those top two concerns.
And when you come into somebody that you say, oh, you've identified this is a great fit for Barracuda, What do you find yourself most often displacing in those situations?
And those places, typically, we're often adding in or augmenting some type of broadband capability with a very low-end security type of strategy, maybe some type of integrated firewall on a broadband modem. And sometimes it could be a small deployment with something like a small office ASA sonic wall, something along those lines.
Good.
Kind of a SOHO type, small office, home office approach.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're trying to help partners visualize. You've got a couple great options, right, that have been really versatile to whatever size of the customer. So I think we're building on a strategy here of we can get to the access, we can connect to in and out of any clouds, in and out of any locations. Now, depending on the size or the style, SOHO, So I think understanding that with Barracuda, that's good. Appreciate that explanation. That helps us understand where that fits. So let's jump into number 2. You've got a great play with Versa. Talk to me about the portal view, the benefits that you see of Versa. Where do you see that fitting?
So Versa is certainly one of our 2 platforms that have that more holistic WAN edge-to-edge view, data aggregation across your WAN. At the same time, it's a very high-end, able to attack very complex networking requirements from a network technical perspective. It's also very flexible for us in that we can deploy it as a base SD-WAN or with next-gen firewall or with next-gen firewall and UTM capabilities. So it lends itself to a number of different deployments depending upon, again, whether you've decoupled SD-WAN from security or whether you're looking for that integrated type solution.
That's a good point. I feel like when we started doing SD-WAN and we brought it into the market, businesses says, well, I don't know about this box that you're bringing in here. No security. I'm cool. This SD-WAN thing is great. Let's do that. Let's start with that. And then over time, we felt like we started to see them open up and loosen up that ability to bring somebody in, right, from a security perspective. So it's nice to see Versa with one appliance that can do all the SD-WAN capabilities you want, and then all the security capabilities that you want, and really tack in UTM and be that one-stop shop for everything. So let's talk about when you see Versa, right? Who's your ideal size customer or location, or is there any verticals that you find that fitting best in? Maybe talk to me about who's your target customer for that.
Well, Versa is pretty broad in its flexibility with us across verticals and customers. We've done customers with over 100 locations with Versa. We've done customers that have, as you mentioned, wanted that integrated security solution. And then there are others, which you also alluded to, that aren't necessarily comfortable with security. Not to say that Versa security isn't good, but it's just not the market share leader they're looking for. So we've done a fair amount of Versas with, for instance, a Palo Alto cloud-based security approach, as well as with a Barracuda. So very flexible in its application and able to scale from small multi-location up to very large. I would say that Versa is more expensive. So therefore, that is probably the one criteria that tends to, align it with an opportunity. And that if where price point and budget is in terms of the customer's priorities.
So would you say then that Versa can sometimes be that foot in the door where we often like to figure out, is there solutions now that we can help customers with versus what are they looking to do in the future, right? And can we put something in place that allows us to build and expand upon and ideally make this customer's life easier to make a change over time when they're ready and not? So do you find yourself bringing in Versa knowing that, hey, they may not need security right now, but they're going to later, and we know we can almost flip that switch and turn that on? Would you encourage people that that's a good strategy to do?
In some cases, yes. So we see that actually more with Cisco than we do with Versa today, but we do see it periodically with Versa where a customer, and I'll give you a use case that we see quite a bit of, a customer has already made some level of investment in a security architecture. Maybe they have sonic walls, Palo Alto, Cisco ASAs, what have you, and they're not looking to pull the plug on that yet. To your point about coming in and being able to provide an integrated solution that they can then expand on and grow. In those cases, we've deployed, say, for instance, Cisco in a pure SD-WAN, Versa in a pure SD-WAN, integrated in with their existing security architecture. And then over time, as they've extracted, if you will, that value for that investment, we then phase out those security endpoints in terms of either stacking security on the edge with Versa or Cisco, or enabling and deploying a cloud-based, regional, if you will, in some cases, security approach.
So is there a lot of the things we talk about is throughput with these appliances. We know we've talked about, building on Barracuda. We've talked about that's more that SMB SOHO model, right? So we know what those bandwidths are going to be more on the lower end, maybe some asymmetrical, some broadband. From a Versa perspective, from a throughput, how many circuits can I put in a Versa appliance? Is there any maxes on throughput of combined multi-circuits? What do you want to see the ceiling of those be? Is there anything specifics that you'd want to give out?
Well, before I answer, if you don't mind, let me just clarify one thing on Barracuda. So while it's from a price point, it tends to be a very great fit from a small office, small multi-location. We do have large financial deployments up to 30 locations, and their boxes can do 10 gig. So they can scale, but oftentimes that's the best fit, as I mentioned, in those smaller deployments where price is a bigger factor. Now, to answer more of your questions, all of our SD-WAN solutions will scale up to 10 gig. And oftentimes we can scale to 20 gig simply by the manner in which we deploy the architecture in an active-active, for instance, role. We can actually therefore achieve 10 gig times 2. Really, at the end of the day, what it comes down to more so than throughput is interface quantity. So interface quantity in terms of number of 10 gig interfaces, and then of course security. And frankly, this is one of those areas where the flexibility we have to be able to decouple security is a big benefit, because obviously as you turn on things like inspection, IDS, IPS, unified threat management, that's creating a lot of overhead on that device. And as such, the maximum throughput of that device will go down, in some cases significantly, from 1 gigabit to only less than 500 megabits, depending upon what level of inspections turned on. So there's where the flexibility of being able to separate those capabilities can really be a benefit in a high bandwidth deployment.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up too. It's a good point. And it's actually come up quite a few times with customers. And I think being able to have you guys scope out, looking at a data sheet is one thing, right, of what it should be able to do. But we watch that, right? The UTM, that's some amazing capabilities, and the CPU's got to pay for that somewhere. So I love it when we get into a discussion with you guys and we get into the architecture and we really try to figure out, get an analysis of what their throughput's going to be, and then what capabilities they really need, and we can understand, no, you're going to actually need this appliance. You're going to actually need this version of it, because UTM is really going to pull that down. And it can crank and do all the things that you want, but it's all about, I think, appropriately sizing that appliance. So I appreciate that you guys have that.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about, so we talked Barracuda, we talked Versa. Let's talk about the name that everybody's heard of. Let's talk about Cisco. Cisco has some cool features, VPN segmentation and other things. Tell me why, right? We've talked about when and where, why Barracuda and Versa fit. Where and why Cisco?
So there's a number of reasons that we decided to include Cisco. We did a fairly extensive evaluation and went through probably 15 different SD-WAN products in the summer of 2018, and ultimately launched Cisco as part of Nitel Connect in the late spring, early summer of June 2019. First and foremost, obviously, was the brand, right? Cisco brand. Obviously started with the Viptela acquisition, but what really got exciting was the ISR capability, the way that they were bringing that SD-WAN code and functionality to the tried and true Cisco router line, the ISR, ASR. Ultimately, we felt that was going to be a point of real traction with Cisco shops, with enterprises. And then, of course, features and functionality wise, there were some very compelling things with cloud on-ramp, VPN segmentation, differing topologies within segmentation, and then the security stack on the ISR, ASR side, which leverages Umbrella and other capabilities that are really of interest to enterprises. So Cisco really was our, really geared at, and while we packaged it to be flexible across different size organizations, we really viewed that as a high-end addition from an enterprise perspective to the SD-WAN lineup.
So that's what I like with, you might come in and you might say, hey, Barracuda is a good fit. But if we're talking to this customer that is a Cisco shop, you're going to be hard pressed to tell them that anything besides Cisco is what they should look at. And rightfully so, right? They've got familiarity in this platform. They know it. They trust it. It's a brand name, and it recognizes it works. So I appreciate that you have that versatility.
Yeah, the reality is we're in business to create products that people want to buy, and as such, we have to recognize that there are organizations out there, typically enterprises, that have put their confidence in the Cisco brand and are looking for a Cisco solution, and that's where we get some additional flexibility with Cisco from the fact that we still have the Viptela acquisition capability, the V-Edge, as well as that ISR ASR approach. So it does give us some budget flex or price point flexibility to be able to provide the enterprises the brand name ISR, ASR solution that they demand, at the same time being able to leverage a proven Cisco platform as well for SMB, SME using the V-Edge hardware and that Viptela acquisition capability.
Yeah. Are you seeing a lot of people start to make the request and kind of ask V-Edge versus the traditional way of doing it?
We see both. Again, most customers leave it to us to provide them with the recommendation, design, and scope out what that deployment needs to look like based upon business requirements and so on and so forth, price point, budget. And in some cases, we do use the V-Edge. We typically see more, again, the enterprise shop that is demanding the ISR, ASR platform. At the same time, sometimes that, based on a design, and if security is an integrated requirement, that, of course, leads us to the ISR, ASR side of the house as well. So again, we have a saying, in my sales engineering team that we let the design ultimately drive the deployment, and that the design is driven by the customer requirements. So we're always after what is the right design for the customer, as opposed to what is the a simple brand name or a type of product.
Good. Love it. You guys definitely have a lot of flexibility in that, and it's made it easy, right? We bring you to the table. We really don't have to walk away from anything because you guys have built that for what the customer wants, and it shows. So love it. Love the platform. Okay, we're going to talk security. So you guys have made some moves in the last couple of years to really bolster the security platform. Talk to me about before we get into the actual solutions here, the advantages that you see on cloud security over just having on-prem security. And let's lead into that a little bit about kind of some of the options that you have.
So absolutely, again, this goes back to the lessons learned that really were the genesis for Nitel Connect, and that as we're dealing with larger and larger multi-site opportunities, and as SD-WAN launched primarily with integrated security, we realized that we created price barriers for our customers to accomplish the things they wanted. We have certain managed security capabilities, event monitoring, typical managed threat detection, managed SIEM capabilities, and they're priced by endpoint. And so as we do large multi-site deployments with integrated security, we are simply exponentially increasing the number of security endpoints that ultimately that customer needs to wrap or put under the umbrella of some type of managed security solution. And so, I'll give you an example. We had one customer that was all over our managed security. They desperately asking us, please give them a quote for our managed threat detection product. But because we had deployed them on one of our SD-WAN platforms with an integrated security, and they were an early deployment, basically we had created a situation where it was a price barrier. They were, 49 locations from a managed threat detection capability. We had simply, through the way we had deployed the product, made it impossible for them to achieve their objectives. And that was a very, eye-opening lesson. And as such, the ability to decouple security from SD-WAN was born, and allows us to, I'll give you another example, an 82-site retail organization who is using Cisco SD-WAN on the edge and a regionally based Barracuda cloud firewall solution. What that done is allowed us to take 82 security endpoints and reduce them to 2. enabling the customer to be able to wrap managed security capabilities they want over those and therefore accomplish their business objectives, but also meet their budget requirements.
Good. You know, security, we've always tried to help people build solutions with security in mind and not have security be an afterthought later. And I think, you know, times right now where everybody's trying to wrap their head around the new way that we have to work and, you know, make sure that we can get access to what we need to get access to. And hopefully security is not an afterthought in that. So talk to me about, you know, even right now or anytime, why should a customer care about, you know, your specific offering, managed threat detection? What can it really do for them?
Well, it really comes down to visibility, Josh. And frankly, I think that in the current situation, that's more critical than it ever was, because I guess I will go out on a limb here and say that my sense is that, you know, security has probably been a victim of the transition in our workforce. You know, many customers, many organizations were not built to sustain their workforce being primarily remote. And when you're scrambling to make those people remote, security is often the casualty of that, if you will. And that's really where managed threat detection shines, because managed threat detection is all around visibility. It's around visibility. It's about threat management. It's about notification. Ultimately, it's about mitigation. So as we move in this, as we're, you know, have moved and continue to move into this new world of primarily remote-based workforce, how is an organization maintaining visibility on those traffic conversations? What, you know, where end users are going? What are they doing? In many cases, is the remote workforce is bypassing the existing security controls because they weren't constructed for those users to be sitting outside the organization. You know, predominantly organizations have over the years tended to do exactly what we've tried to teach them not to, which is simply stack security at the perimeter. However, once you move the workforce outside the perimeter, then those security controls can be, you know, largely non-existent.
Right. Good points. So we've talked access. We've talked all the flexibility you have. We've talked connectivity to cloud providers and setting that edge wherever they need it set. We've talked about the different platforms that you have in SD-WAN with regard to Barracuda, regard to Versa, regard to Cisco, and we talked about security. So wrapping up with the products and the technical side, you know, depending on what people need, we recognize that people need different solutions at different times. Out of all these things that we've talked about that I just recapped, can a customer come to Nitel for, you know, do I have to have all of those needs at once? If I just need a couple of these things? Talk to me about, you know, what does Nitel want to see from a customer, right? What's the minimum that you guys want to see?
So a customer absolutely does not need to need all these capabilities. The idea behind Nitel Connect was to clearly and completely comprehensively articulate an integrated solution, if you will, a series of capabilities, right? That a customer could embark upon what we would consider a partnership, knowing that they were partnering with an organization who'd already thought through all the various capabilities and evolution of their WAN over time, and had already done the necessary testing and integration knowledge and awareness to ensure that if and when the appropriate time came for a customer where they needed cloud connectivity, where they needed hosted voice partnering, where they needed some type of flexibility and access, 4G, primary, secondary, tertiary, whatever it may be, they were already partnered with an organization who had thought it through and had that comprehensive solution that would be in a position to support them at that time.
All right, everybody, thanks for joining us today. You've sat through a great session with Nitel and a deep dive engineering review. More to come. Our goal with these really, remember, is to just get you understanding of the platform and everything in the weeds that they have and how you can really understand how these position. So Todd, thanks so much for joining us today. Appreciate you and look forward. Hope you stay healthy and the Nitel family stays healthy, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate you having me.
All right. See you guys until next time.